Hello, my name is Chris Blask. I am your host again for another episode of the Inevitability Curve, where we take topics that we're all thinking about and we look at where we've been with them, with that, maybe figuring out a little bit more about where we are today, and with any luck, get some insight into where we're going. So, with me today is a good friend, smart person named Chris as well. Chris Blow, how are you, man?
Doing good, Chris. How you doing?
I'm loving life. I'm back on the boats, right? We're Facebook friends. You see the sagas, right? This is the first episode of this series, after the boat sank during Hurricane Milton and got them back up and running with these solar powered monstrosities and brought to you by Starlink. So,
Glad to see that things fared fairly well for you.
well, they do. And we're talking about in the green room, everybody, we're cybersecurity folks, right? And anybody in cybersecurity, at your age, I won't out your age, but you're, 15 years younger than me. And like your age and a little bit below that, you got here through an interesting path. And I won't say that, somebody in their 20s and 30s, today, hasn't also come into security through an interesting path, because that just happens. But there are courses and things these days. It's all the structure is already built. But, for a lot of us, we're just, hacked our way through it one way or the other and put it together. Right.
Yeah.
So how did you,
some of it quite literally.
Quick rehash of how you got into security. What horrible life choices did you make over the last number of years?
the last several decades. Yeah, like I had originally, got into this stuff, I guess, in my youth, being nefarious with a computer. Very extremely grateful that of all people, my grandparents were the ones that saw that I was very adept to doing things with electronics. And I luckily had a cousin who was at college at the time who was able to get a really great deal on some salvage computers that the university was cycling through. And so I am forever indebted to my grandparents, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, my parents, who helped make that. I think it was my Christmas / birthday / whatever else for the next year, way back when. But that led to me doing all sorts of fun, nefarious stuff, as several other people in this large community can probably talk about as well. That led to, when I went to college, there wasn't a cybersecurity program. I was actually being pushed to go into English by my guidance counselor, because computers, you didn't really talk about computers. I took a couple of C++ courses in my high school, and that's literally all they offered from a computing standpoint besides typing. And so it's not like they were going to come to me and be like, oh, so you do cybersecurity and you've played with the phone system and stuff. Cool. Well, let's put you on a path of success then for that. It was like, no, you're good. You should do English. So I didn't do that at all, and ended up cycling through a couple different majors through college. And that got me to ending up in computer science, which then after I graduated, jobs were hard to come by due to the timing of it. It was around 9/11. So my first job was I wasn't immediately placed out of college. The one that I was supposed to do right out of college, that ended up kind of fizzling out into the ether. So was a line cook for a while, and then ended up getting a job as doing help desk. And that led from help desk to doing system administration, to network administration, to just building, and then moving on to the next company, building, moving on to the next company. And then that led to just going between companies, consultancy, et cetera. But yeah, it's interesting now how when I'm looking through resumes, because I have a rec to fill, it's everybody degree in cybersecurity. And it's that would have been nice back then, but that's it's very interesting that even though it's only 15, 20 years difference, probably more than that, because I always think I'm younger than I am and I'm not, but so be it. I think we all do. How
I embrace the age.
Exactly.
I'm in bonus rounds now. I mean, I've outlived most of my ancestors.
Hey, you can't beat that.
Right.
But yeah, it's crazy how much has changed in the past just 15, 20 years, especially in those type of organizations.
It is, and that's sort of our iterative theme here, right? Where have we been, where are we now, where are we going? In my career, cybersecurity, it was information security. I love the naming parts of it. Just how we've changed names over time. There was in my visibility, there's been data processing, right? Before
Yep.
information technology, and right, and there was information security, and then the cybersecurity wars. Cybersecurity word is there a space. That was a fascinating little era. And anything that goes from anything that that becomes widely adopted and starts out as something some small group of people are really interested in goes through predictable phases, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, there's a fair bit of there's a lot of the folks right at the beginning who don't really fit into the as it grows, right, as it all goes corporate and so forth. um and it fascinates me that in the end it tends to work out. Like the all the doom and gloom. We're going to have a cyber Pearl Harbor. We can take down. They'll attack the critical infrastructure. And it's, to be clear, all true, right? The things need to be done. There's a lot of people need to do them. Policies and agencies need to continue evolving and so forth. But the lights are on. I'm sitting in a
Yeah.
boat in the ocean talking to you over a satellites. Um, on a Microsoft device, that so far, this morning at least, hasn't ruined my coffee.
Yeah. Knock on wood.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
So
You're right though. It's some of the, you talk about the doom and gloom. One of the things I'll never forget was my freshman year at college. One of the first classes in just general computing that everyone had to take. The professor came into the room and walked to the front of the very large recitation hall, shut off all the lights, and gave this 5-minute speech on this is what it's going to be like on December 31st, 1999, after 11:59:59. And this is what you have to look forward to. And we need to be prepared for this. And just 5 minutes. It was, we're all like, thought this was like, isn't this just general computing? Like, we're not going to save the world over here. But yeah, you talk about things like doom and gloom like that. It's that was the big thing. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have all had some sense of, are we prepared for this? It wasn't anything, especially at the time, like, mass panic. One of my colleagues worked at the New York Stock Exchange during that time. And, they were going through the same amount of panic there on like, are we good? Are we sure that we've got everything up to date? Are we going to be able to do business that following week? Not just that following day, following week, following month. The millions upon millions of dollars that were spent by companies to make sure that everything was good to go. And then we all know it rolled over and the world's still here. So good job us, I guess.
and for maybe the first 20 years of my life, I considered myself a baby boomer. So I was tactically a couple of years too late for it, but I was the youngest of everything, and so I grew up with that cohort. And I look back, one of the things that sort of set me apart, because I just was that I just wouldn't. I did buy into it. I bought into all the what are, say, common conspiracy theories, basically, right? Either religion or aliens coming to get us, or it's a governments and corporations are all doing the whatever, and we're all going to die in nuclear war, and we can't feed enough people. But it wore off pretty quick. So I started looking forward and back. It's like, well, actually, we've been around for tens, actually, it turns out hundreds of thousands of years, and we tend to be still here. And of the history we can see over the last a couple thousand, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20, 40,000 years, depending on how you look at it. There's always been Vogon, battle cruisers coming to destroy the Earth, and we're still here, right? And I think it does a disservice. I think it causes drag, right? And this is, let's see if we can turn the conversation towards Well, you and I have spent a lot of our careers working on, which is sharing information, right? And I think this is right inside the loop, right? Companies and technical people and engineers and so forth, have a lot of intrinsic concerns about sharing anything. Oh my God, the competitor's going to find out my thing. People are going to know I got vulnerabilities or whatever it is. And I think that this entire exercise that we call, America, Western democracy, post Greco-Roman, democracy, Magna Carta, this free speech, open source type of thing. It's while I love it for personal reasons, I think it's mostly just more efficient. I think it's more competitive and advantageous to speak very, very clearly about what you can and be really clear on what your risks are, right? Does sharing this information, does sharing this threat intelligence cause me more problems than it solves? And just work your way through it until you get clean communications. And sort of bouncing around the room on this one, but there is so much. It's hard not to talk about the misinformation, disinformation world we live in right now, right? Because it's such a big part of our daily lives, right? Fake news or who believes, there's no way to tell what information is information. But you and I work in worlds where we share information and we know how true it is, or the current working definition of true. That's how we take threat intelligence and act on it. That's how we take supply chain intelligence and act on it.
Yeah.
And we're building systems that is going to automate this, and it's going to take actions on our behalf in reliable fashions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's been interesting, especially all the job hopping I've done throughout my career. There's constants. And one of the big constants has been around sharing information and what can be shared and how it can be shared. And it's always very tight-lipped. Even, which is extremely frustrating, especially like what I do now, like my current role is leading threat intelligence and essentially offensive security. And in doing that, like there's a lot that I want to share and there's a lot that I think should be shared, but there's so much that we have to be tight-lipped on. And I believe my firm belief on it, at least for a lot of these companies I've worked for over the years, is just because they are behind the curve on like what the true benefit is of actually sharing this information. And they're so used to trying to protect their crown jewels and try to make sure that their secret sauce doesn't get out. But it's like, what is your crown jewels anymore? Like, do you even know what your crown jewels are? Because what they were in the 90s and the 2000s, it is not, even in the early 2020s, late 2010s, is not the same as it is today. We've talked about crown jewels in cybersecurity, information security, whatever you want to call it, for so long. And that definition drastically changes, I don't know, quarterly, monthly, depending on what you see. And you have a very big reaction to that. So I'm dying to hear what you have to say on this.
Oh, it's, so in the, what was it, 2002 or so, I did a SIM startup with a couple of friends, right? And one of the big internal arguments we got was about our using Salesforce, because Salesforce is brand new, right? And it's like, no, we should build our own CRM. It's our customer list. We got to keep that private because that's part of our crown jewels. And my argument was, we don't have time or people to build and manage a CRM. Our network isn't necessarily any more secure, our actual network, than someone who's actually providing services for a living and hiring, people to do security staff stuff. And if I had my competitor's customer list, I would, I don't know, mostly start a fire with it. I don't care. It's not that much use to me. I mean, maybe, okay, don't call them, but it's probably their reference customers anyways. They're already publishing those. I already know who they are. And
sure.
So you've made the point exactly right. People don't know what their crown jewels are. And if you don't know that, then from a security perspective, and not even security, to address these anxieties and allow you to more freely do business and engage with the world, you have to identify what it is you're actually trying to protect. What are the risks? Intellectual property in threat intel, and again in supply chain, you get all this corporate anxiety about intellectual property. It's like, how are you protecting that now? Hiring contracts and hope.
Right. I think I won't say every job that I've been at, but most of them, especially like obviously not so much for the consultancy side of things, but any of the actual companies I've worked for in corporations, one of the first things I've always asked, like before I take the job, I've always asked the hiring manager is, can I have like, obviously let me drink from the fire hose of whatever corporate stuff you need me to get through as part of my onboarding process. But like, can I have a month to really understand what we're securing? Not just like take this at everyone's word. And you'd think that I like magically grew 2 new heads, and they're like, you want a what? And it's like, no, I want to understand what we're trying to secure here, or what I'm trying to, break into, if it's me doing something from an OffSec standpoint. Like it's one thing for me to look at I don't know, like the magic sauce you use to make your widget. But it's another thing where like, is that the most important thing? It might be to that section of the business, but if I go and talk to HR, are they going to say that's the most important thing? No, they're going to say that their employee records are the most important thing. It just goes on and on and on. So like, let me go and talk to different groups. Please introduce me to those groups and let me absorb in that fashion. In fact, at one of the places that I worked at for a decent amount of time, they had training that a fairly decent sized group of folks within that company had to go through. It's no surprise. I've done work with like several insurance companies, so it was underwriter training. And I asked if I could be a fly on the wall, and it was, I think 8 or 12 weeks. And they reluctantly let me do it, but I learned a whole lot about health insurance during that time. And I learned a whole lot about all the different bits and bobs that they were using as far as an underwriting process went. And that helped me when it came to security awareness. I helped them develop some things around their like security awareness programming, education stuff, especially like for Cybersecurity Month, which, we're currently in, so topical. But not only that, it was, now I have a much better idea of what I need to go and look for as we're doing different offensive security exercises and whatnot. So, or even as we're building things out from an architecture perspective, like me helping these enterprise architects be like, you're forgetting important things here. And yes, underwriting isn't the only thing in this company, but it ties into so much of their whole like business process as a whole that it plays a very large role. Especially when you learn like all the different nuances, and systems that they have to go into to do some of these things, and how it's not just like some magical one-stop shop. It's like, oh, you have this thing that you have to leave on that is, it's just like any other large business. And you have this thing over in the corner that's grossly out of date. You can't do anything with because it's still running like Java version 2. And it has to be run on a, Windows 3.1 machine. Or it's running OS 2 Warp, whatever, make up your, whatever fun OS you want to go with at the time. But it has to sit there in the corner and do the thing. But these people have to do this because that is part of the, multi-billion-dollar chain of events that goes to make the thing work. So yeah, it becomes a real interesting time when you start digging into some of those pieces.
And this is, when as we reach the middle of our time here, taking one chunk of the past and taking it right to the future, there was a website called all.net that has been around for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
Run by Fred Cohen, the great Fred Cohen. If you know the word computer virus, is because he wrote it down for the first time in his PhD thesis. Fred is as detail-oriented and of a person as you'll ever meet. And he and I had a company called Fearless Security for a while that was using the methodology. If you go to all.net and click on the word protection in the upper left, you'll see this, eye chart that you can click on until your brains fall out. But, Fred and other folks, Richard Steenan and so the older analysts, were the first people to put together security analytics. And what we see the big, companies, PwCs and Gartners and so forth doing today, that, I've been saying this so long that maybe it's not true somewhere, but basically you can spend $600,000 and, people will slow down your business for a number of months and give you a 500-page report. Which is better than nothing. because when you stop and say, I really need to understand who you are before I can even begin to tell you what you need to secure how. And Fred has focused on this stuff. What Fearless did was basically bake that down to a day, but we couldn't get it below 8 hours. It has to be 8 hours, walking through this, very large, information system piece by piece. But do you do this? If you do, how do you do that? Do you do this? How do you, who are you? And the few times in my life that I managed to actually go through that entire thing, everything else just gets so easy, right? It's like, here's why we're doing this. Because you see, this is who you are. And if you stop doing these things, you don't exist anymore. Because, that's, the things cost money, and this is where all the money comes from, right? Or you're a government agency or whatever it is, right? There's a reason you're here.
Right.
And without that, I hate to get cynical, but it's, these days, it's like, hey, can you help me secure my company? It's like, are you willing to stop and look at who we are? No. We just need to. Okay, then no. No. It's not.
But yeah, you've got to. That's the thing, is like there has to be some willingness to share. There's got to be some willingness, and I even took that. I can't believe I'm actually going to admit this in a public setting, but there was 2 years where I apparently had a brain aneurysm, and I was a PCI DSS QSA, and
we still love you.
I was already doing so.
You have to embrace your faults, right? And that's what brings
right.
healing.
I had already previously within that same company, I was already doing PCI pen testing, and because it was there and it was something that we were doing, but they were like, we want someone technical to become a QSA. Do you want to do this? And I'm like, and they enticed me by hey, we'll go out to, we'll basically do the training out at, while RSA is going on. So go hang out with people at RSA and whatnot too. I'm like, sure, why not? So here I come, this technical QSA, and it was very much a binary, love or hate when I went to client sites, because I wasn't just taking stuff at face value but I would ask them to actually explain how they do things, even if something is, I won't say that taking credit cards is simplistic, because most of the time it's not, depending on what they're doing. But I would ask them to explain exactly how they were doing things from a customer service standpoint, how they were doing things from a website standpoint, and where this all came together and where it then broke apart. And once I understood that, it made the rest of the conversations, and it made the rest of even just the evidence collection easy peasy lemon squeezy. Because I'm like, cool, I need to see these 10 things. Can you bring this up and show this to me right now? And they'd be like, yeah, let me go grab 5 people. We'll be able to show it to you lickety split. Easy, done. And it's just this whole sharing of information, and you don't have to share every single thing, but be open. Just be a little bit open. And that's going to help us move so much farther. We were talking in the green room beforehand about ISACs. ISACs still exist, and they're bigger than ever. And it's such a wonderful thing to be a part of. Especially for my folks. I will be the first to admit that while I might be, I might be a leader over, threat intelligence at my current employer, doesn't mean that I am some super knowledgeable person about threat intel.
He is.
No, I'm not. I'm really not. I actually I love the fact that, my entire team is light years smarter than me, but the folks that I have aligned to threat intel, wicked smart individuals that have taught me so much around what real threat intelligence is, and how beneficial it is to have that curated information and be able to give that curated information to specific stakeholders within your company, and using things like an ISAC to, quite frankly, it makes it easier for us to share information, because you're under that TLP stoplight, and we're able to take that, as I'm sure many other companies are, and we're able to have real connections with other companies under the guise of that we couldn't do before. Similar company to similar company. So, financial institution to financial institution, whatever it may be. we're able to have real conversations under the guise of that. And that's one thing that's continuing to help move that needle in the right direction as far as sharing information and making sure that we're all aware. Go ahead, because I'll be on a soapbox for the rest of this time if you don't stop me.
No, it's a good soapbox, and we're just gonna light it on fire and stand on top of it and dance. I think at this point, because so ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers, for those of you who don't know about that, came out of a 1990. I always get this wrong, 6 or 8 presidential directive that there shall be an information sharing analysis center in the private sector to work with the government, and it turned out there was a dozen, and now there's a couple hundred, and as there should be. And as you say, so the healthcare ISAC is a good example, right? This is a relatively significant organization now, with close to 50 full-time staff who are just working on sharing information with. I just got these numbers the other day, but an impressive, massive chunk of the healthcare space, where they've got a community and information is flowing in appropriate times. And you used to, one of the, you phrase this, I won't get it right exactly, but I love that sort of thing. And the way you just said it so naturally, you get the right sort of information in the right parts of your company, the right sort of time, right? Information sharing doesn't mean, billboards, right? You don't have to take, there are things between putting it in the safe and dropping it in the ocean and telling everyone. And that's those things in between are everything we live with. And we can do that in business too, right? And I think everything we were just talking about, indicates strongly that the most likely future is where there's more and more of this, where companies and organizations are better able to figure out who they are, so they can make better choices about what they should do. Among those things, security and taking care of their systems, having the right systems. And I think, to our sort of theme today, looking back on that, say in 30, 40, 50 years, you'll see one of the huge benefits was more information flowing more quickly. And I'm going to use the dreaded acronym AI, because this is one of those things I keep thinking that this generation of what we incorrectly call artificial intelligence has some fantastic benefits for security. And I think this is one of these, right? As I say, getting anyone to stop, just convincing them that they do have the time, and you do have the time, and then getting to take it and walking through everything, a security professional really knows to do a diligent job for them, is still really hard. I think the kind of horsepower, lots of relatively intelligent pencils, we get out of AI, gives us the opportunity to bring that into scope. So you can get an organization and say, look, before I'm going to, start telling you to encrypt your hootie-ha, we're going to go through this process that's easier and simpler. It's not that hard. It's not that much. I guess it's not that far from the easiest you can make it today to easy enough that most people will actually do it. And once you have that, I think all sorts of systems, like from technical systems to policies primarily, about who gets to know what and what you have to worry about sharing and saying to whom, just get way, way easier. And the amount of drag that removes from every individual inside an organization and groups. And I think it really is transformative. I think we waste 90% of our effort on things that are not what we're doing.
Sure. Absolutely. We do. A great example, especially from like an Intel standpoint, and I'm not going to give like all praise to AI and whatnot, but just optical character recognition, like OCR, as far as the amount of stuff that is out there to turn into some type of curated intelligence. Is it all going to turn into something that's, worthwhile? No, but that's why you curate your intelligence. But if you have a much easier way to bring in some of that stuff so that you can get halfway decent summarizations within whatever tooling you're using, and you can have it spit out, like take a 100-page PDF and it turns it into 4 paragraphs. That's much easier for an engineer or an analyst to go through and say, yeah, this could be applicable. Maybe I need to go look through the rest of this document some more. And they can just do mad searches on keywords within that entire 100-page PDF. Maybe they strike gold and it's something that's like, this is pertinent to a part of the organization that they would have never known about this because it was buried deep within something. So trying to find some of those needles in haystacks, yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit there. And we're just at the beginning of some of this stuff. And you and I both know this. This is like, AI didn't just magically appear 18 months ago. Like, but did it hit mainstream, and did it take off as far as like, what we see with ChatGPT and all the other GPTs and LLMs out there? Sure. But it's not like this stuff didn't exist prior. We're just leveraging it in some good ways. I'm not going to say a lot of good ways. Some. It's got a ways to go, though.
Well, I think its biggest benefit, to me, is addressing time to transparency. Another one of my little catchphrases that I've just been obsessed with the last 3, 4, or 5 years, because it speaks to so much. I mean, what you're saying is it makes it easier for an engineer. Now, could you have done that by hand? Sure, you could always do it by hand. You don't have the time. You don't have. I mean, time turns into people. How many people do you need to read through all of that and curate that intel before it gets down to an engineer? And if you don't have Control F and find it in a PDF, then you actually have that engineer read the whole 145. So it's all about shorting the time. Mm-hmm. And I don't. I as I look out into the future, honestly, I'm just right on the crux. I kind of think that maybe there is no digital consciousness. I think the actual artificial intelligence from the movies may be physically impossible. May never happen. Never happen. Which I'm not sure every time I say that out loud. But we're so far from that. We're not replacing people. We're replacing a lot of jobs. Yeah. But what we call AI right now is really, really good at brute forcing some things so you can give people time. And it's not that I can now have 5 less people. I mean, again, sometimes yes, but I think what we'll find is that now you can do the thing, right? You never even thought of doing the thing. I mean, of course you can't do the thing. That would take 1,000 people sitting there. You can't. It's not even on the table. All of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, that doesn't actually take anything anymore, and we can do the thing. And I think from a global security perspective, right? Shout out to the great General Michael Hayden, right? I got an hour of his time right after the Navy Yard shooting. Remember that in DC? There was a Navy Yard as the day after that, and I was on a crusade to convince many people inside the Beltway that there was this grand visibility we're moving towards, and ISACs and threat intel and all that was part of it. And General Hayden got a incredibly sharp guy, as well or better than anybody. Asked really, really good questions, right? But it's again, it all takes too much time. I mean, saying you and I have lived our careers inside this. The war stories. Let's get this group. We had to get authority to do this thing. It was a public sector or a private sector, and it took 6 weeks to talk about this paragraph and the exact wording of the. Imagine we could do this more quickly. Imagine we could have at the nation state scale or global scale, the kind of things, with you focusing on threat intelligence these days that you don't even dream of, because but if you had 10,000 people, analysts sorting things out, you could then get to the point, and I'm really soapboxing at this point, but my vision for supply chain is that I can pick up something and this is my mouse and I'm me, right? So I get to see appropriately, if I have the rights, from whoever I bought it from and whatever contract they have with whoever they bought the parts for, all the way back to whoever made the plastic and who, shoveled the sand into the furnace to make the silicone chip, right? And I can see that right now. I mean, it took way longer to say that than it should take to do that. But that implies that we can take because you could do that now, but it would be a 6-month project. But we can automate this, and we will. I think that's a big chunk of where we're going in the future. And threat intel and security rides along with that. Yeah,
absolutely. Completely agree. I think that what we're seeing, we're just going to continue to see more of this. And it's funny how you talk about that's a 10,000 hour, 10,000 person and 100,000 hour job. And we joke about that stuff, 10, 15 years ago. Some of that stuff in some weird convoluted way could potentially become a reality. Because you're taking out a lot of I need half of those 10,000 people to do nothing but read the things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't have to do that part anymore. Are the summaries that we get for everything perfect? No. Is anything that we're doing, that would eliminate what a human's doing going to be, just spotless every time? No, but it's a start. And I've noticed it with my teams. We didn't
trust individual things that much anyways.
Right. I mean, and humans aren't infallible. So we look at, you look at things with like look at the latest Verizon data breach report. Continual rise in the amount of human interactions with when it comes to either ransomware or extortion of some sort. The number, I can't remember the exact number now, but again, continues to rise for the human element part of it. So it's not like we're infallible. So we're just by pushing some of this stuff off into things like AI, it's better than nothing, and hopefully allows us to maybe progress in what we can do, and helps us innovate more, helps us push the envelope more on things that used to be just like, wouldn't it be great if all this pie in the sky stuff.
Great. Well, with that, before we start talking about pies in the skies, because pies. I mean, we can go with that one for half an hour.
Yeah.
But nice to see that I'm not the only one that thinks things are going to work out. Our kids are going to grow up, the world will go on, the lights will stay on, most of the time, and we'll figure out the problems and we'll fix them.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. This has been great.
Thanks. Anytime. And yeah, when as we're talking about in the green room, Indiana, maybe one of my trips out to Mom's place, we'll have to see if we can hook up there and share more Indiana stories. And you are, of course, you're one of my Disney kin. I mean, there are very few people that are more Walt Disney World than I am, right? And so you're a Florida guy periodically. So sometime in the wintertime when I'm not up in Canada, come sailing.
Yeah, absolutely. Run Disney season kicks off next week, so I'll be down there a lot. Waking up at 2 a.m. to go run,
and I'll be watching, having a smoke, drinking a coffee on Facebook while you do that. So that's God bless you, everyone. All right, man. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks out in the world. Have a good day.